feeling like, is this what life is? You make your money, you spend your money, you get more money, you spend the money, and it's just a cycle. Is that what life is all about? Because this kind of sucks. Like, if this is all life is just getting and spending money and trying to make yourself happy and not finding a real purpose in life, this isn't good, you know? There has to be more. Something significant about my life that I don't think it makes me better than any person, but it's something about my family that's important to know. My mother had an abortion before me because the doctor said that, you know, it wouldn't be good for her health to have this baby because of a disease she had. After that, she had a miscarriage. After that, two babies were born, Jennifer and Kimberly. They were twins, my sisters, and they both died 2 weeks after birth. So out of the first 5 babies, I was the first to survive. Like I said, I'm not thinking that I'm somebody special, but it seems that God chose to break the cycle of death through my birth. And so I'm grateful for that. I look at that and I think it's important. I think it means something to me, you know, that I should do something with my life for God, because God gives life and He gave me my life. I was born in 1977. I lived in Pembroke Pines, Florida, suburban middle-class neighborhood with my father, my mother. My sister was, 2 years behind me. As I grew up, things got a little bit dark. When I was 4, 5 years old, my parents were fighting a lot. My mom had developed a disease, an autoimmune disease called lupus, epilepsy, and chronic asthma. Just her body kept getting sicker and worse. She had to take pills that caused her to gain weight. It was just a difficult time traveling to try to figure out what doctor can help her out of state sometimes. Just no real answers, and it weighed heavily on my father and mother. So they ended up getting a divorce. There was domestic abuse. I'm not really sure what happened. I just remember waking up one night, 2 in the morning, and cops had surrounded the house. There were about 5 or 6 of them outside. I came out of my bed and my dad told me to get back inside, and next morning I was told that I would be going to stay with my aunt and uncle in Missouri for a little while till things calmed down. My parents did get a divorce. I lived with my mother. We lived in a rundown apartment on Washington Street in Hollywood, and it was not a nice neighborhood. I remember her going to get milk for us at night, about 9 o'clock at night, and the corner store was across the street. I saw her hide behind a dumpster, and inside a guy hit the owner over the head with a bottle to get the money. And eventually my mom made it back, and I don't know if she got the milk or not, but it was just a hard life out there. It was a little different situation. We didn't have any money. She made a paper Christmas tree out of construction paper for the wall, and that was Christmas for us. So this is when Star Wars was coming out. Not Star Wars, but Return of the Jedi. And so you got those posters out of the cereal box, and that was a welcome relief to some extent. E.T. was out, those kind of things, and I remember that as a kid. But life was hard, and I didn't really understand how bad it would be without a father. Now, they fought in and out of court constantly. So my mom got the house shortly after that, and then my dad had a restraining order against him, so he wasn't allowed at the house at all. There was a lot of anger and frustration and all of that, so he was away. Now, my mom struggled to provide for us, and it was very difficult on her to bring enough income in, even though my father was paying child support and everything. And it was her burden to try to, make life good for us. I was getting bullied in school, and I was kind of a mama's boy, and I let people, punk me, I didn't have to do that, but I didn't have my father around. And you need your father around to train you the way that you need to walk in life. A godly parent or godly parents are going to train their child in the way that God wants them to be trained, so that they can know the Lord, and then they can understand how to stand up for themselves the right way. Well, I didn't have my father there, and my mother kind of shielded me and turned me into a mama's boy, and that's not a good thing. That carried on through a lot of my life. But as I continued to grow, Life was hard in the house because she was sick a lot. She could only work 3 days a week. This disease required a lot of pills. She was on like 10 different medicines. And so it was my job to shut down the house each night, like 6, 7 years old. And it was dark outside. Take out the trash, shut the door, make sure nobody comes in. My mom would say, be careful, lock the door. Ted Bundy's loose, because he was out at that time and we were in Florida. So this is crazy, right? We lived on a lake. It was dark. So just locking all the doors and windows and going up to a black glass was scary for a child. And you're hoping you locked everything because you didn't know who was out there. I was afraid of my dad. I didn't know if he was out there, Child shouldn't be afraid of their parent like that. My mom was hooked on painkillers. She had 3 different doctors dispensing pills that didn't know about each other. And it was my job to help her not abuse these pills. She had been in and out of Narcotics Anonymous and just got off some of those worse ones. But these weren't any better. This was Soma. It was a high-powered muscle relaxant. And so I remember it's my job to hide the pills and then give her 2. And you don't need any more than 2. This is a really strong pill. So she would take 2, then an hour later call me, go get 2 more. Well, you got to listen to your mom, so you go get her more. And I, continued this process until she would finally pass out. This continued for years. She wouldn't be able to walk around. She'd just kind of crawl and pass out wherever she was at. And I hate saying this about my mom now. It's like humiliating to tell her story like this, but it's still my story, and I have to say it like it was. I had to shut the blinds because I felt like we knew that the neighbors were watching on behalf of my father, and we had what you call CPS, but it was HRS back then. That was, they would take kids away if they weren't in a good home. And so I was trying to make sure nobody could see in to have a case against us. It's too much for a kid to have to focus on in life. So you got defending your mom, afraid of your dad, protecting from the neighbors. Your house looks like crap. Everybody in the neighborhood knows that. You're getting made fun of at school. Kids would, give their clothes away to the consignment shop. Their parents would drop them off. My mom would end up buying those clothes. And when I go to school, a kid would see me in their clothes. That's pretty embarrassing. So it's hard to live a normal life like that, My mom did the best she could, didn't always make good judgment calls. We're on food stamps. I have to run in the store with a big president face on those stamps and just, pay for food with that. One time, 2 churches showed up at the same time for giving us Thanksgiving food. And, this group's like, who are you? And I'm like, we're here to give her food. What are you doing here? We're doing the same thing. They felt like they were getting played, My mom didn't have a car, so my grandmother had to, bring her car over and let my mom drive it. My grandmother was in her 70s, my grandpa, and I loved them a lot because they took care of my sister and I. Going to their house about 6-7 miles away in Hollywood was a relief because it was a stable house. They weren't on pills and things like that, and they were just stable, But as time goes on, you keep living like this, and the pills continued. She had seizures. I'd have to call the ambulance when that would happen, and so the seizures happen sometimes frequently, and I have to put something in her mouth to make sure she doesn't swallow her tongue. Well, life goes on, and my mother taught me that, God needs to be feared. So I thought of God as somebody who's out to get you, so I wouldn't think about God a lot. She also taught me to pray. She said, pray so that God will make me better. She wanted healing, and who wouldn't? So I believed that you prayed to God, but he was kind of stone-faced and cold. I didn't think bad of God. I just didn't think that he would do anything because my prayers were never answered. And then if I ever did something evil, she would let me know that God is not happy with that. And she would scream and yell, and that would make me feel like this is who God is, And God is to be feared, but there's a side of God that's love that I just didn't really understand. So I was trained to see God as somewhat angry and judgmental, which God is a judge, but not really loving. I was also trained to see God as absent because my father wasn't there, and that impacted me. So time goes on, and some things that led to the sins that were part of my life was finding my father's porn stash up in the closet one time when I was about 12 years old, which was kind of gross to me then, but as I got to 13 and puberty hits, None of the girls at school liked me. So this is a way to fulfill those desires. So it kind of clicked, and I hid those things and I kept those things, and it led me to pursue that throughout my teenage years, right? My mother continued with the pills, and here's where I'm going with that. So one day I come home, beautiful blue sky, 4 o'clock, like 7th grade. It's 1991. It's May 8th, right? I just told her I hate her guts. I hope you die. I don't love you, this and that, being a spoiled brat 2 days before that. Well, on this particular day, my grandma was home, and my grandma's car was there, which meant my mom was home. So my mom didn't go to work or whatever. So my grandma said, your mommy's in the hospital. She had a heart attack. And I was like, alert. But this had happened before, not a heart attack, but like emergencies. And so she'd always come home. So I figured it's going to be okay. Well, this time it wasn't okay. We got a call. My sister was there about 10 minutes later. And my grandma started screaming, started crying hard. She came to us and said, your mommy's dead. She grabbed me and my sister and just started crying. Oh God, oh Jesus. And she just uncontrollable, because that was her daughter, And I remember the world felt cold. The Belle Biv DeVoe was in my head from the weekend, when will I see you smile again? And then my grandpa took me to Burger King, and Unchained Melody, the Righteous Brothers, that song was playing. And so those two songs are etched into my brain with when my mom died. Whenever I hear those songs, I think of my mom's death. So what actually killed my mom? Well, she took all 30 pills one time. Now, some saw it as a suicide attempt, and I knew my mom that she was never trying to die. She loved my sister and I too much. She wasn't trying to kill herself, but she was just unchecked with this medicine. And she just rolled the dice too many times, and God decided this is the time, and so she died. She died at noon, somehow, swallowed her tongue, and they found her at 3 o'clock. And so that's one reason why they weren't able to revive her, and she died. They worked on her for 45 minutes, in the house. I remember going in the bedroom, and I could still see some of the paramedic supplies on the ground, and I could put the scene back together in my mind. Well, my dad came over, and he had been remarried for a few years to my stepmom, who I did not get along with, either of them. And I didn't want any part of their lives, but now I had to live with my dad. He came over that same day when she died, and he was, relieved. No more custody battles, no more court charges, no more, all this kind of stuff, child support. He could actually save his money now. And he would eventually move back into that house with my stepmother and her older children and me and my sister, and raise us there a couple months later. But the funeral. So my mom is dead now, and my father takes me to go pick out a casket to make the funeral arrangements. And I'm in this room full of caskets, and I'm like, this is like from Night of the Living Dead or something. This is like a horrible place for a kid to be. So I picked the cheapest one I can find, $2,500, and I said, do you guys have anything less expensive? And the funeral director was like, well, I can give you a body bag for $300 if you want that. His smart remark was not well received, and I just, we picked that casket. That's all we could afford. My dad didn't pay for it. It went to my grandmother, and she had to foot that bill. So at the funeral, I didn't want anybody there that didn't belong, and it was the viewing, and my dad and his wife came, and I quickly told the funeral director, close the box. I don't want anybody to see my mom, and he said, well, you'll get a bad reaction out of people if you close the box right now. It's not a good thing to do. So, they left it open, and I was angry. I couldn't even honor my mother in her death. Like, I couldn't even bury her the right way. I wasn't even left alone for that. I was angry about that. So life was cold after that. My dad wasn't really good about making me feel better about that or being compassionate, just get it together. Life goes on. You just got to get it together, And so hard time adjusting with my stepmother. They thought we should all become Catholic. And I was raised Baptist, nominal, not really a Sunday only, or not even a Sunday only, but more of a Christmas and Easter Christian, in VBS, Vacation Bible School sometimes. But I had a dream when I was 10, and in this dream I was riding down the street, to go play ball with my friend. And then the sun had set, it was a beautiful blue sky, and then everything changed to sand. And I was racing my bike through the sand. And I felt this feeling like I'm serving Jesus. And it was the best feeling I'd ever felt in my life. And I got baptized either before or right after that time when I was 10 years old. And I remembered that, but I didn't know what to do with it. So I'm not connecting that to Roman Catholicism. It just didn't click. I just felt like, this is legalistic, and I didn't know what that was, but I just felt like we're doing all these things, but I don't feel close to these people. There was a sense of God being there, but I didn't know any more than that, and so I just kind of resisted it. I went on life, got involved in drugs. I met people that lived in rough neighborhoods. Chris Andel came from Brooklyn, New York, my best friend. Clarence and Dwayne came up from Miami, from the Pork and Beans Project, from this place here, Carroll City Flea Market, 183rd Street. And I lived with them for a long time. I lived with Clarence and Dwayne for close to a year. The mom took me in when I was 15, and I learned how to be more sinful than I was. And I learned how to live rogue. And I got involved in weed smoking, I got involved in cocaine, and I did a little acid, and just it continued to progress, and lots of pornography, and trying to chase everything wrong, and stealing and shoplifting and just doing everything to make myself feel good and feel full. But none of it was working, but I was able to chase this because nobody was catching me. I wasn't going to jail, I wasn't dying or anything, so it was all good, I would try to have girlfriends, and as I would get one, they would all dump me, but it was like I was trying to find my mother's love again. I couldn't find it in my parents at home. I didn't trust them, and I couldn't find it in the girls. So when I was 17, I met my wife. I met her at the Carroll Street Flea Market, same place where Clarence and Dwayne had come from. And we dated, and I remember feeling like this is the closest thing to my mom that I can find. Somebody tell me what to do, but still love me in the process. And, I don't know, it's a weird thing that when you don't grow up right, you kind of want the wrong things throughout your life. And if you didn't grow up to be taught like a man should, then you're not going to be a man. You're just not going to happen. You have to learn what you didn't know, So life goes on. We're dating. It's a pivotal moment because I just got dumped by one girl. I meet my wife. My dad is moving with my stepmom and my sister up to Vermont, 1,000 miles north. And I've got a decision to make. My dad's like, you need to get your stuff ready. You're moving with us. I was like, Dad, I'm not coming with you. I don't want anything to do with you. So I left my mom's piano that she gave me. I left all of her big paintings that she had, every memory I had. I had the clothes on my back. I had a couple of duffel bags with some belongings. And I slept on couches. And, 2 weeks I was staying at a guy named John's house. Another guy older than me, didn't have much direction, but his parents were gracious and gave me a place to stay until Chris got home from New York with his mom. And then she would rent a room out for $230 a month. And that was good. Now, the first 2 months she had questions because I didn't have any money. And she's like, okay, where's this money coming from? I don't see any money right now. So, but I would get October 15th, 1995, or, I would get $20,000. That was coming my way. That was my inheritance money from my mom's part of the house after litigations were settled and liens and all of that. This is the part that I would get. My sister would get the same amount. My mom wrote it in there that we can't have it till we're 18. So my dad comes down. I'm living on my own now. He comes down and he wants me to take the money and give it to him so that he can kind of distribute it to me every month, and I get a job and I live responsibly. I wanted nothing to do with that. So I kind of kept the money, 10 grand in an account where I had access. The other 10 was in like Fidelity to just kind of grow as, interest and all that. So here I am living alone. I feel like I'm on top of the world. I've got 10 grand available. I'm buying music equipment, top of the line. I've been rapping for years now because that's just what I did. I started at 14 or 15. Chris was into that. That was what he came from, in New York, where he was from. And so he was always doing that. We did that together. I got pretty decent at it, and I was really good with beats because We go to the studio all the time, but I had a piano background, so I could put melodies together in ways that maybe others couldn't. And so it just became something that I loved. And we'd go to this place called the Underground, Hallandale Beach Boulevard and Carver Ranches, right down in Hollywood. And $50, you can make a beat, takes an hour or so, and then they give it to you and come back and change it or record your lyrics or whatever. And we were doing a lot of that. So I was living selfishly, I was living sinfully, I was living for David. I wasn't respectful to my girlfriend at that time, which was my wife now. I wasn't respectful to the house I lived in. I still hated my dad and everything for the past. I didn't call him, I didn't talk to them. I spent the money doing a lot of drugs. I would freebase and do other stuff, and it was just getting worse. And it was kind of I was chasing my first high that I ever got with cocaine, smoking it, and I could never get back there. And that plus the marijuana plus the drinking, and the money was going down now. So I remember I cleaned out 10 grand, and now I took out the other 10 grand. Now I'm starting to waste that money now. 10 more grand's gone. So I'm on the last 10 grand. I'm buying clothes. And I'm knowing that this can't last forever, but I'm also feeling this funny feeling like, is this what life is? You make your money, you spend your money, you get more money, you spend the money. It's just a cycle. Is that what life is all about? Because this kind of sucks. Like, if this is all life is just getting and spending money and trying to make yourself happy and not finding a real purpose in life, this isn't good, you know? There has to be more. One time when I was at Chris's house, living in that room, it was a rainy day, it was cold outside, it was the winter of maybe 1996 in January. I wasn't married yet. I had watched this movie called Inhumanities and Faces of Death because I thought that'd be cool, and all it did was make me feel like the world is a cruel place. Like, it wasn't cool to see death. It was something to run away from. I was running from death. I didn't want to die. I had overdoses. Jesus, please save me. And I'd come out of it, but I'd go right back to the drugs a week later because I wasn't trying to get cleaned up or anything. I was just trying to do enough, get as close as you can to the edge without going over, because I was trying to get as high as I can get without dying. And that's just kind of what I think drug users do, you know? And so this particular day when it was cold and rainy and I'm watching, you know, this show, and the next day I was just thinking, I want to go to a desert and I want to get a tent where there's no people, and I just want to pray to God for the rest of my life. I don't like this world. I don't want to be here anymore. I felt like I didn't have any sexual desires at that time or aspirations in life or ambitions. It was just like, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't like this place, you know, but I didn't want to die. But I continued to sin. I continued to live for David. And I continued my drugs and my sexual ways and all this kind of stuff, and just filling up on myself, you know, and music and everything, and just distractions. And the Fugees, you know, Ready or Not, this song came out here. And this song is a song that's kind of like stamped into my mind because of what it means to me. It was one of my lowest moments where I realized I need something to change. I need something, because this life of total freedom that is really like bondage, there's got to be something better out here. I knew I wouldn't find it in money. I knew I wouldn't find it in a job or a career or a family or a, you know, more drugs or whatever, although I didn't stop. I didn't know what to do. So I was depressed. I ended up marrying my wife. I was kind of high that morning. Here's that. And, you know, I didn't know what marriage was going to be like. I didn't know how to be married. I didn't see marriage modeled for me growing up. So how would I live my life for God as a married person? So I continued to drag my wife down now with me through everything, because now she's associated with me more closely than any other relationship on earth, right? We're married now. So time goes on and we move to Lauderhill, Florida. And Lauderhill, Florida is next level. This is the ghetto. This is the place where people are getting shot, killed, raped, mugged, you know, carjackings. Everything's being stolen. The cops are everywhere. Ambulance, just constant activity. I had a friend, Jason. I was looking for weed one time. I go into this weed hole, and they're starting to swarm around me because of, my skin color is different. They know I don't belong here. And this guy came out. He was from New York, so he didn't get along with the people in Fort Lauderdale, because there's these distinctions that happen with people from different areas. So he brought me into his house, treated me just like himself, like he didn't see color, and he was a good friend, but he was misguided. Him and his friend would borrow my gun to go rob people. Eventually, I told him, take the gun and get out of here. I don't want you coming back with that. So his friend took the gun, never paid me the money, and then he tried to rob somebody and he got shot. So I wasn't out there doing robberies or something like that, because I just didn't want to. I wasn't trying to hurt people like that. I was just really misguided, though. So hanging around other misguided people without direction, who didn't have a perception of life and God, was destroying me. It was just making it worse. I was sinning all by myself. I didn't need any help. But now putting two people together like that just was worse. So time goes on, mischief goes on, and I kind of have to quit the drugs. It's now like 1996, and my salvation is somewhere between, I don't have the day, but it's like between when Tupac died and when Biggie Smalls died. It's somewhere in between there, and I don't know exactly where, but it happened somewhere in that moment. So God was motioning toward me during these times. When I worked at Kmart, in the quiet moments, having to go get carts in the, Lauderhill Mall, area, I'd go out and get carts, and I'd see like a tract, trust Jesus. It was a little cartoon thing, like, you got to jump out of the window and trust the firefighters to catch you on the trampoline, or you're gonna die in the building. It's the same thing with Jesus. You just don't believe, you trust. You need to throw your life into his hands. And that sounded great, but I didn't really know what that was like. A lady tried to pick me and my wife up. She had her kids in the van. She was on her way back to somewhere near where we live. She said, hey, it's late at night. It's kind of bad out here. Do you want us to, I can drive you home. And I said, okay, sure. So instead of taking a cab, which we had to do every night, this lady took us home. She said, you want to go to church with me? We'll pick you up in the morning. I was like, no, I don't want any of that. I want the benefit, but I don't want any of that, and then probably the best thing for me would have been to go to church with that lady, but I didn't do it. So anyway, I'm just thinking about God and what it would be like, but terrified of God, because I know I'm a sinner, but not really, thinking about it too much. I'm still living my life. So I get real sick, and I've got pain in my head, and these indentations seem to surface here, and it's weird. I quit all the drugs. And I remember I went to Dr. Jagaru and Dr. Neptune, these two doctors who were from the islands, and they would help people who didn't have money to go to a regular hospital or something like that. We didn't really have any money. So we go there, and I'm expecting Dr. Jagaru to tell me, you're young, you got your whole life ahead of you. Just take some aspirin, come back if it gets worse. But that's not what he said. He wanted my family history. He heard about my father's heart disease, about my mother's lupus and epilepsy and all of that stuff. And then, he said, this could be very serious. I want you to go to this hospital. I'm ordering a CAT scan. I want all these blood tests. I want these x-rays and all this. And as he said this, it just shocked me, because I realized I could die at any moment. I thought, I'm going to die when I'm 80, and I'll repent before that time, after living my life for myself as my own God. And it's like God was saying, not with a voice, but with a feeling, this terror came over me, like this dread came over me. And it was like, you're not in control of your life. I can take your life right now. And that was scary. And I knew, if I die now, I am going to hell. I understood my sin, down to the rappers I idolized, because they were murderous and they took no crap from anybody. And I was like, I want that kind of power. I want to be like them. And God showed me, you don't want that. This is where this leads. And you're on the wrong pathway right now. But I didn't feel like I could get off this pathway. I just felt this, not just guilt, but terror. And I walked out of that place with my wife, and I walked into traffic and almost got hit, crossing 441, which is a real busy intersection between Broward Boulevard, Sunrise Boulevard, Oakland Park Boulevard, 19th Street. That's where we used to live. And she pulled me back, because I was so wrapped up in this idea that I'm going to die. and I'm going to perish forever because God is holy. God is righteous. I'm not. I do everything against God. I take good things and I make them bad. And he knew that and I knew that. And so I go home and I'm too weak. I'm just trying to eat soup laying in bed, and I got to work that night, and I finally get to work and I'm quiet. And the next 2-3 days I'm quiet. I'm just kind of, like stuck, just stuck. And I come home one night. We live on the 4th floor of a grungy condo in Lauderdale Lakes. Everybody's asleep. Reshma, my wife, her uncle, and his girlfriend who lived there. And I'm out in the living room area, big glass window looking out. And I'm watching TV and I see Benny Hinn come on, and I hated this guy. Oh, I hated this guy so bad. He was like a liar, and I hate the way he talked. I didn't like the way his hair looked. I didn't like anything about this guy. And, he's going to help taking people's money. But there was something different now. They were on stage and people were holding up their canes like they got healed. Now, remember, I had a need. I didn't know if I was really sick or what's going on. So I just say, without even thinking about it, God, is that real? And immediately this force, this power, this energy just like entered into me, and I just started pouring out my tears to God. I just fell forward crying, and I felt like love just filled me. And I couldn't understand it because I knew how sinful I was. And you and I know if that guy's good to you and that guy's bad to you, you don't go near the bad guy because he makes your life worse. Why would God come near to me? And so I just cried for about an hour. It was like cleansing. It was like just seeing that God was near. Why? I don't know, but he was near. And I felt loved. And I was like, why, God? And I kept feeling this feeling like, you don't need to run away from me when you sin. You need to run to me. Almost like God could handle it. So I asked him, since you're dealing with me, since we're being real now, since this isn't just a nominal thing I'm doing, this is like really interacting with you now, God, who are you? What is your name? Are you Allah, Buddha? Who are you? And I just remembered Jesus on the cross. And I, for the first time, really understood this is for me. That death on the cross that was for the world was for me. And I accepted it wholeheartedly. I didn't know fully what that meant. I didn't have all the answers to my questions, but I knew that Jesus was there with me. And he received me. And I think that was the first time that I really went to bed with peace in my life. Now, life had been hard after that. It's been hard now. That was many years ago. It was like 27, 28 years ago. But ever since then, I've had a peace inside me just knowing God is with me. He's not leaving. He's with me. And I began to read the Bible and see how he was moving in my life. It's already written here. These are the things he promised he would do for his children. He's been working on me to remove those sinful tendencies toward, pornography and lust and stealing and, drugs went out the window. I never actually went back to the drugs ever. Like I hadn't gone back to any of the drugs ever, not even one time. Like that's the power of God. I did struggle with alcohol 2-3 years after that for a couple years, but God eventually showed me this isn't part of your life anymore. Some things he went directly and just was like, boom, we're stopping this right now. I'm going to interrupt this quite forcefully. Other things he let me kind of struggle through it. And he's been very patient with me through the years. And as I read the Bible and I see the Spirit of God working to change my heart, my desires, I'm sensitive to what God is now, who God is, toward wanting the things that God wants. And this is what he said he would do in Jeremiah. This is the new covenant, that I'm going to make you sensitive to my spirit, to what I want. You're going to love me like I love you. Never to the extent that he loves us, but this is the work of God. So if you want to know God, you can know God, but you got to go through Jesus. Nobody goes to the Father except through the Son. This is John 14, right? But while we were still sinners against God, we weren't crying for salvation. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That means God loves us. None of us can be made right because of the things that we do. You can't erase your bad things with the good things that you do. It doesn't work like that. But the blood of Christ, that pure sacrifice that he offered because he never sinned, that was received by God for your sins and for my sins. And if you accept that, if you confess that you're a sinner and you want that relationship with God forever, beyond just heaven, you want him, and you trust Jesus as the only way to save you through his death, burial, and his resurrection, he's going to save you and he's going to change you. And you will find your heart bending in a direction toward God that is quite uncommon to whatever you do now. And I just encourage you to do that. If you bow your head and you pray along those lines with those elements, read the book of Romans, especially chapter 3. Read the end of chapter 6. The wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ, his Son. Romans 10, 9 and 10. If we confess with our mouth and believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead, we will be saved, and he won't disappoint. So, thank you for listening.